Well, here at the Aussie Wire, we are about three things: truth, freedom, and hope. And one of the things that brings hope to me and to a lot of people are people who choose to take action, who choose to do something to try and make the world a better place. Some people do that through very dramatic and over-the-top ways, and some people do it through very boring and humble ways that you might never notice. And some people do it through ways that, frankly, sometimes may leave you scratching your head a little bit. My next guest, Dave Pellowe, is a name that might be familiar to a lot of you. He's the host of The Good Source, an independent news media channel that I recommend you check out. He's also, well, I'll get him to speak for himself. You know what? Dave, welcome to the Aussie Wire.
Thank you, Topher. Pleasure to be part of this great initiative of yours.
Well, you've been kind enough to have me speak at a couple of your conferences, and you've got conferences coming up shortly. We'll get to the conferences in a minute because that's the insane part of what you do. That's the bit that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Let's start with the bit that kind of does. You're the host of The Good Source. You started this a number of years ago. Can you give, for those that don't know, what is The Good Source? What is it that you do? What can people expect? Why should they check you out?
Well, I used to be involved in party politics, and I've been involved in the coalition, and I've been involved in Family First, a minor party. So I've got a lot of campaign and party machination experience, knowing strategies and the effectiveness or not of that. And in 2016, at the federal election, I was part of a large church congregation who really failed to lift a finger. And that wasn't them. That's pretty normal. There's not that was. I had good support from the pastors for my work, but very little Christians. My tribe of people really knew enough to overcome what we now call misinformation, but in church circles we call bad teaching, and really bad claims about why Christians should stay out of politics and the public square. And they're all fallacious, and so people on the day of the election, the day after the election, were praying for righteous government, and I'm scratching my head, depressed, angry, frustrated, thinking, where were you yesterday when you could have changed it? God asked you to love your neighbor. He gave you an opportunity to steward political plurality and inclusive liberality, and you were mowing the lawns or doing something completely unimportant on Saturday, which on Sunday is like praying for a hole while leaning on a shovel. It's kind of an exercise in vanity and futility. So what I decided to do was contribute to the teaching and close the gap of information that exists. And so I started blogging, and I started writing a book, which still hasn't been published. Congratulations on your forthcoming tome, by the way.
Thank you.
And then somebody said, hey, can I put you on TV? I said, sure. Because it just seemed like all I want to do is get this information in front of more people. I was essentially publishing the book as I went through articles.
Sure.
And then we started a conference, but it went from my own self-titled blog, Pellowe Talk, to something broader, The Good Source, which much like other players in the market, is more about promoting the team instead of the individual, and that together, a rising tide carries all boats. So that's what The Good Source is about. And with the advent of the Aussie Wire and other players in the independent media space in Australia, they're doing it better than me with regards to independent video production. So I just produced my show now. I used to produce a bunch of video shows for independent players, and now we simply syndicate articles. So it's a good place, a good newsletter where you'll get 6 to 10 relevant articles once a week, as well as my show, the Church and State show. And that's when we launched into the conference.
Well, there's a number of authors there that do publish regularly on thegoodsource.news, whose names would be familiar to many Aussie Wire viewers, and I do recommend that people check that out. All of that's familiar. All of that makes sense to me, Dave. I've walked a similar but different path myself. Began in 2009, speaking out, simply trying to get the word out on things that I believed were important, and one thing's led to another, and here I am 14 years later. The bit that I struggle with is that you then decided, as an otherwise sane and well-balanced human being, as best as I can tell, that you were going to get involved in conferences. And this is the bit that I shake my head and go, Dave, what are you doing with your time? Conferences, surely everyone knows, conferences are just talkfests. It's just a bunch of people who agree with each other, getting together in a room and slapping each other on the back. They're boring. Everyone just falls asleep. These are what people think of when they think of a conference. Now, you're a smart man, and you've decided that you see value in conferences. You believe that actually, as a part of your mission of trying to spread the message that you're trying to get out there, conferences actually make sense. Help me make sense of that logic.
Well, again, speaking to a specific tribe, conferences, I don't know. Look, I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe I know just so little enough as to do the impossible. And there's many people who say conferences don't work. And to be honest, it's a constant re-innovation of how do we at least cover costs? How do we break even, let alone how do I put food on the table for my family from this? It's definitely not a get-rich-quick scheme. But, after 6 conferences now in Brisbane, an annual Church and State Summit, we are attracting a regular crowd of approaching 600 people. I think we'll surpass that next year. I hope we do. We've got a venue that fits 700, so hopefully we can fill that. And there's also a great amount of content that's produced from that, which people love watching and will invest in. At the moment, all of those videos from this year, Coffs Harbour, Perth, Brisbane, soon to be Adelaide, they're available on the ADH TV website. But if you go to churchandstate.com.au/register, there's links to where you can watch all of those videos this year, including your own wonderful message from the summit this year, as well as Adelaide. And so people should check those out, and they don't cost anything. It's a bit of a free market experiment or gamble that the consumer will find value and voluntarily make donations and support the work.
Sure.
And I'm a believer that everybody should do that. There's multiple platforms that I donate to. I don't donate to all of them, but certainly more than one, as well as good works. But the point of a conference isn't that it's a talk fest. And I try to, without diminishing the value of people who come for what the left would call a safe space, but a place for encouragement and training. I do try and introduce a taste of disagreement and dissent. In Perth, you and I were on a panel that got a bit fractious from friends amongst. We just disagreed and thrashed an issue out. So it's not about backslapping and mutual agreement. It is actually about testing our ideas against each other and having the integrity and intellectual honesty and self-esteem to actually let our ideas be challenged.
Sure.
And that's good for the audience as well. If you hear a speaker who's been invited and trusted to have good motives and honest thinking, you may still disagree with them at the end, but that only serves to strengthen the force of your convictions. And if they haven't been tested, if your ideas and assumptions haven't been tested by somebody who is sincere and civil, then you actually don't know how valid or strong your ideas are. But for the large part, they are encouraging, and they are intended to close the information gap that most voters have, that most Christians have. They are intended to. One of the things I like to say about the Church and State events is that if you're not interested in politics, you're going to love this event because it's not a political nerd fest.
Yeah.
It certainly is enjoyable by political nerds as well. But what it is it's if you love God and if you love your fellow Australian, as the Bible commands us to, then that is more than enough common ground for you to enjoy the content. Because the worst thing we have in this society right now is low information. The government education, political parties, and the lying harlot media have no interest in an informed populace, and they do nothing to support that. They do the gestures and they go through the motions, but it's hollow and usually false. And it's channels like yours and conferences like these which will provide people with a reliable source of objective, honest, God-fearing information.
A mix of encouragement and iron sharpening iron. I think that's a great summation. And actually, you've introduced a new sort of thought to me that from a strictly economic perspective, the people that are actually buying tickets and attending not only get the benefit of being there, meeting people, actually being in the room. There's something about that when someone's speaking, but in a sense, they're actually subsidising and making possible the creation of that content that then goes out to others. So from an economic perspective, they're not just paying for the ticket, they're actually financially making it possible for that content to be created in the first place. Now, you've mentioned a couple of times that Adelaide is coming up. It is just a few days away now, beginning actually this coming Friday. I'll be there in Adelaide, looking forward to that. And look, I don't mean to brag, but I'm going to be opening I'm the opening keynote on the Saturday, and then also, despite the fact that I brought all kinds of conflict to the last panel that I was on, Dave, you've been brave enough to put me back on another panel to close the Saturday as well. But there's actually some other amazing speakers. Tell us about the Adelaide conference, who's going to be there, and why people should come.
Well, it is just 1 week before the Voice referendum, and to my great disappointment, there's been a lot of silence from conservative Christians who see and recognise the dangers of the proposed changes to our referendum out of fear of being maligned and slammed in media, while those Christians who believe in virtue signalling and patronising minorities have been quite vocal in it. And so we will be taking a loud and confident stand as Christians on the Word of God, that dividing a nation by race and ethnic groups and giving some people extra privileges above all the others is the least loving and just thing to do possible. We deeply care about our Aboriginal brethren, but I think, as some of the rhetoric has been going around accurately, government welfare, help and charity should be targeted at need, not a racial group, which is patronising and condescending in the very least, if not a waste of resources. So Senator Nampijinpa Price will be speaking on Friday night, and we've also got the excellent historian and religious historian and political historian, Dr. Stephen Shavura, and I'll also be speaking theologically on the cons of the Voice, as well as alternatives. And look, headline, the whole thing is a religious manifesto, the Uluru Statement from the Heart, and this referendum is based on that, and the government introducing it is a violation of Section 116, and certainly no God-fearing person should be endorsing the Uluru Statement from the Heart. So there's going to be 2 or 3 sessions on that, and a panel as well. And then there's going to be a whole lot of other topics. We always have a diversity of topics in the Church and State Summit. There is a theme, and that is Jesus is Lord. Our nation was built on that, and the preamble through which the High Court is meant to interpret the Constitution already acknowledges that the people in whom the sovereignty is vested equally resolve to form a commonwealth, but with the important clause, humbly relying on the blessing of Almighty God. So whether you're religious or not, I think we all should agree that no politician or parliament is the supreme power in the universe without accountability. And just because they make a law or issue an edict doesn't mean it's moral and just. So that is really the theme of this conference, that Jesus is Lord and you're not. Now, if we had that kind of humility in every voter, we would have that kind of humility in the parliaments, and society would be a much better place. Having said that, we don't expect you just to believe because we say Leviticus. We will come with logic, data, facts, and evidence, which correlates and harmonizes with the Word of God. There's going to be a lot there. Senator Alex Antic will be there. He'll be speaking on the misinformation, disinformation bill, which is a heinous violation of liberality in a democracy. And Sarah Game, MLC, who's the first One Nation member of the South Australian Parliament, and the first female to be elected as a One Nation MP since Pauline Hanson. So she's a fantastic lady. She'll be speaking on the topic of men's rights. Not so much men's rights as acknowledging and appreciating men as much as we do women. You've got a minister for women, you've got a minister for youth, you've got a minister for children, and apparently men have no needs, no problems, and need no support or appreciation, which is obviously fallacious. But just trying to rush through it quickly. We've got Henry Olonga. Henry Olonga is amazing. He's a former first-class cricketer, international first-class cricketer, one-day and test matches for Zimbabwe. And he counted the cost of speaking up against wickedness and injustice by publicly mourning the death of democracy in Zimbabwe under the brutal dictatorship of Robert Mugabe. And for that, he risked his life. He was exiled and lost all of his career and wealth, and married a South Australian girl, now lives in Adelaide. And he's an opera singer. So he'll be singing the anthem for us and speaking about what it means to have courage, conviction, and truth and love in our public life.
Look, Dave, I'm going to have to stop you there. We've got Adelaide coming up this weekend. The link to get tickets will be in the description of this video. If you're in South Australia, make sure you get there. There's Hobart coming up. There's also the annual Brisbane conference and many more besides. We'll have links to be able to go and check all of that out in the description of this video. Dave Pellowe of thegoodsource.news and of churchandstate.com.au, thank you so much for joining us here on the Aussie Wire.
Thanks for your time, Topher.